Good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Kirkpatrick, and I'm the Dean of Libraries at Smith College. I just started this fall, and I'm so happy to be here. And it's wonderful to have all of you with us here, both online, so hey, everybody, and in person. At their best, libraries are spaces for connection and inquiry, places where we come together to think, question, and learn. Events like this are a meaningful part of that, and so again, I want to thank you all for being here. And it's my pleasure to welcome our distinguished guests, Linda Holmes, Byllye Avery, and Dr. Nikia Grayson. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mari Brandman, who is the Sophia Smith Collection's archivist, and she will take care of the program. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Hello, all. First, a brief mention, it's known on the Zoom, but that this event is being recorded. So as Nancy said, my name is Mariana Brandman. I'm the Sophia Smith Collection archivist here at Smith College Special Collections. So that means it's my privilege to steward the amazing collections we hold in the Sophia Smith Collection of Women's History, which is one of the oldest and largest collections of women's history in the world. Yes. I agree. The SSC has more than 850 collections that reflect the diversity and complexity of women's lives and identities through the lens of social, political, and cultural change, as well as gender justice. At its core, it really focuses on individuals and organizations working on behalf of women and gender minorities. The collection's strengths include reproductive rights and justice, women's liberation movements, suffrage and civil rights, community activism, iconoclast creators, and lesbian and queer history. So today, I'm so excited to moderate this panel discussion in celebration of the opening of the Linda Janet Holmes Oral Histories of African American Midwives collection. This collection includes 46 oral history interviews that Linda conducted with Black midwives across Alabama in 1981, as well as additional records of her work as a birthing justice advocate. The collection provides unprecedented access to the experiences of Black Alabama midwives who cultivated diverse birthing practices handed down from African foremothers and ancestral midwives who were enslaved. And so with that bit of orientation, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Okay. So first, at the end here, we have Dr. Nikia Grayson. Dr. Grayson is a nurse midwife, anthropologist, educator, and reproductive justice leader dedicated to restoring and advancing Black midwifery in the United States. She serves as Chief Clinical Officer of Choices Center for Reproductive Health, where she has helped build a comprehensive midwifery-led reproductive health system, providing full spectrum care to predominantly Black and marginalized communities across the South. Dr. Grayson is also an associate clinical professor at the University of California, San Francisco School of Nursing, where she co-directs the Nurse Midwifery Program and is deeply engaged in training and mentoring the next generation of midwives. She is a former board member of the American College of Nurse Midwives and a national advocate for policies that expand access to midwifery care and reproductive health services. Yeah. Dr. Grayson's work centers on reproductive justice, community birth, and workforce development, including the creation of innovative training programs designed to increase the number of Black midwives in the United States. Through clinical leadership, education, advocacy, and storytelling, she works to reclaim the legacy of Black midwives and to build equitable, culturally rooted systems of care. Grounded in the South and guided by a commitment to bodily autonomy and collective liberation, Dr. Grayson continues to advance a vision of healthcare that is community-centered, justice-driven, and transformative for future generations. Next, we have Byllye Avery. Byllye, yes. It's a shorter intro, but this is what she asked for. Byllye Avery has been a longtime reproductive justice advocate, beginning with her work with the Clergy Consultation Service, referring women from Florida to New York City for legal abortions before the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. Byllye served on the board of directors of the National Women's Health Network, worked with the Boston Women's Health Book Collective, which authored the pioneering women's health book, Our Bodies, Ourselves. She co-founded an abortion service, the Gainesville Women Health Center in 1974, and Birthplace, a birthing center in 1978. In 1983, Byllye led the first national conference on Black women's health issues, which launched the National Black Women's Health Project, now the Black Women's Health Imperative, in Atlanta in 1984. A recipient of the 1989 MacArthur Fellowship, Byllye has served as a clinical professor at the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University, an advisor at the National Institutes of Public Health, and a visiting fellow at Harvard School of Public Health. And finally, Linda Janet Holmes. Linda Janet Holmes is an award-winning writer, researcher, biographer, oral historian, curator, and a longtime birthing justice activist. Supported by a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Humanities in 1981, Linda recorded interviews with Black midwives who have become nationally recognized, including Bay Moten, Lavinia Taylor Benjamin, Maud Drake, Maddie Hereford, Thelma Schamberger, Margaret Charles Smith, and Rosie Aaron Smith, who's featured on our event flyer. Linda's 1996 book, Listen to Me Good, The Life Story of an Alabama Midwife, co-authored with Margaret Charles Smith, received recognition from the Congressional Black Caucus, midwifery organizations, and birthing justice advocates as a groundbreaking book. Published in 2023, Safe in a Midwife's Hands, Birthing Traditions from Africa to the American South. You can see some copies over here. Linda's second book on Black midwifery practices highlights interviews recorded with the descendants of traditional midwives in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Ghana. Their stories confirm that Black midwives succeeded in continuing traditions that reflected cultural influences passed on to them by their ancestors who were previously enslaved. Linda has served as an assistant professor in the Nurse Midwife Educational Program at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, and is the director of the Office of Minority and Multicultural Health, research scientist, in the New Jersey Department of Health. Linda also represented the Black Women's Health Project as a consultant to the Rockefeller Foundation, which aimed to strengthen opportunities for traditional birth attendants in Malawi, Tanzania, and Kenya. Holmes is a past board member of the National Women's Health Network, and her work has received extensive support from the Black Women's Health Project. Also importantly, I think, in another vein of work, just as important, Linda co-edited with Cheryl Wall the first book focusing on the life and work of the groundbreaking writer and Black feminist Toni Cade Bambara. 2007, Savoring the Salt, The Legacy of Toni Cade Bambara, and published the first biography of Bambara, A Joyous Revolt, Toni Cade Bambara, Writer and Activist, in 2014.
Thank you, Mariana. So I feel with that extensive introduction that I can now kick up my heels and relax and retire and have fun. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, how old am I?
I have to hold the microphone.
Just move it a little closer.
Okay, is that working better in terms of the sound? Okay. So thank you, Mariana. And Smith College Archives for preserving the collection of the oral histories with Alabama midwives that I recorded back in 1981. Also, a big shout out to my family, my daughter who's here, who is now 50 years old. I think she was 3 or 4 when we moved to Alabama to begin this project. Thank you in advance to those who are new to my work, who might see the opening of the Midwife Collection as an opportunity to dive more deeply into understanding how the past contributions of Black midwives that I interviewed offer timeless wisdom. There are so many names of folks I could list in my thank yous, but time today only allows me to recognize a few of the women who have been pivotal in influencing my work. I want to mention Elizabeth Bing, whose childbirth education classes I attended in Manhattan, New York 50 years ago, led me to feel empowered going into the birthing space as a Black woman, making demands like I used to make when I was a Black revolutionary student on campus, right? I felt empowered. Another pivotal moment that influenced me was leading a project at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey in the mid-1970s. That's when I worked with nurse midwives and the Black community, in particular the Muslim community, to transform a labor room into an alternative birthing space for women who wanted to be cared for by midwives. The project helped me to learn more about the practices of midwives and how their care leads to healthy, positive, rah-rah midwives for care for mothers and babies. But what really got the ball rolling for me was a conversation for the project that we're going to be talking about today, was a conversation that I had with a longtime friend, Khadijah. Khadijah lived in Selma, Alabama. Khadijah was the one that introduced me to some of the first midwives I interviewed. I will never forget her telling me when I said, "Do you think there are any midwives still around that I can interview at this time?" She said, "You will have no problem finding Black midwives to interview in Alabama because all of us came here through the hands of a Black granny midwife. All of us came." So this is she's saying this in 1981. And I'm going to quickly add here that her brother said, who was also attended and provided care for by a Black granny midwife, he said that whenever he left town or was traveling, he was very active in the civil rights movement. When he came back to Selma, one of the first stops he made was to visit the midwife who actually cared for his mom in the process of birthing. My daughter said to me, to please stay focused on what you've written because you're going to end up giving very long talk about the last 40 years of my work. Okay, so back to how I got started. When I shared the conversation that I had with my friend Khadijah, with Joan Burston, a feminist scholar and a friend, she told me that I had a unique opportunity to document Black midwifery traditions. And she was the one that suggested that I apply for a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship. I was amazed that with my master's in public administration, with a background in journalism, that I actually received the award. And again, this is not in my written notes that Ghana approved for me to say today, but I learned from the person who was actually reviewing my application that he had had a difficult childbirth experience. It was very disappointed. So he was listening and was immediately supportive of the work that I wanted to do, which maybe I should move to finally. Finally, I am grateful to my mentor and friend, Tony K. Bambara. Tony K. Bambara, I met 50 years ago, and she became a lifetime mentor that helped me to know that I can believe in myself and that the dreams that I was dreaming about could become a reality. It was also Tony who gave me the understanding that the work that I was doing was similar to what the midwives referred to as a calling. In knowing this, I recognize that my connections to this work continue to provide me with a deep and unending sense of fulfillment. Once again, thanks to Smith College for preserving the collection of the midwives that I interviewed.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for bringing the babies. The Africans say whenever we have a baby in a room, we have a future. So thank you. Thank you, Smith, for taking care of our work and caring about the work of women of color. Thank you so much. It's such a good comfort to know that it's in a place where future generations can come and see. Because like Linda, many of us have devoted our entire lives to this work, and it's appreciated. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
For being the person that you are and just making sure that people know who Black midwives are. And I was caught by a midwife, Black midwife. And when the white country doctor got there, I was in my mother's arms, all nursing and everything. So I grew up with a real healthy respect and a love for midwives. And at the first national conference we had, the historic one, we had a whole big exhibit of midwives and nurses. And we knew at that time that we had to really do some work in order to make midwifery a practice that Black women would use. And what I mean by that is in 78, we opened up Birthplace because when we had the abortion clinic, a lot of the women, the white women, were complaining about their birth experiences. They said the doctors told them it was none of their business. Don't ask questions. So we knew if white women were upset about the way they were treated, you can imagine what was happening to the Black women, you know. And so there was work to be done. But we didn't start out with a whole host of Black women wanting midwives for birth, because we had to go and unlearn all of the lies that the doctors told to get rid of the midwives. And there was work to be done. So I don't want you to think that this just kind of happened. It didn't pop up out of the ground. This has been almost 40 some years of making it happen. Say when I got pregnant, my kids were born in 61 and 66. Okay, my baby is 60 years old. Can you believe it? And I didn't even want to breastfeed because that wasn't what Black women were doing. And I wanted to be knocked out. And if that doctor wasn't there, did the next one know how to knock me out? You know, so that was the thinking. So there had to be a lot of work done for this cultural shift. And it's a good thing it happened, because the situation as it stands now is that we need, good? Okay. We need sensitive people taking care of Black women. And, it's just, it's incredible. I need that message to stay focused, because I have so many stories in me that I can tell, but the thing of it is the work that Linda has been doing, the documenting, the going and getting the stories, to finding the women in Africa, I'm up to a minute already? Oh. Okay. I have a lot to say, so I'm gonna play by the rules and try to come to an end. And maybe you all can ask me questions during the period. But I just want to leave with you that the legacy of things that happen in our communities is very important. And those lessons must not be forgotten. And when we had the birthing center, we would go to the grand midwives who lived in Gainesville and say, how did you handle this? How did you not do an episiotomy? And they say, you iron out the perineum. You iron it out. What do you do in between labor? Give them a taste of honey, and that'll bring up the energy. And I'm going to close with one of the things that I used to love to do is the women would be in labor, and I realized they would say, Byllye, I was screaming so loud. Well, they wasn't screaming loud, but what I realized is that to them, they sound like they were screaming. So I would get in their ear between the contractions. I would say, you are powerful, you are strong, you are magnificent. And like our sister Nasra used to say, she was a midwife in Atlanta, we would talk the babies out of the mamas. We would talk the babies. So there's still a lot of things that they did that's very important, and those lessons should not be lost, but need to be incorporated in the very fine humanistic caring care that women are providing, that you all are providing with the birth doulas, with the postpartum doulas, with all the midwives. I just love midwives. I just think they're the best thing in the world. Let me just get it on out there, you know. I fell in love with them.
Wow, that was amazing. Well, I wrote what I was going to say because Mariana told me that I had a short amount of time. So I wanted to make sure I hit certain things. But it's truly an honor to be here tonight for the opening of the Linda Janet Holmes Oral History of African American Midwives Collection. You know, Linda's work was the first work I read about Black midwives. And so I feel like this is a full circle moment. And Linda and I have become friends now.
Yes.
And it's been an amazing journey. So I want to begin by thanking Sophia Smith Collection and Smith College Special Collections for preserving these extraordinary stories. And tonight is more than a celebration of an archive. It is an act of restoration. You know, before we go any further, I want to acknowledge the midwives whose voices are preserved in this collection, the women who walked dirt roads at night, who carried their bags from house to house, who showed up for families in moments of both vulnerability and joy. Many of them practiced with very few resources, but with tremendous knowledge, skill, and trust from their communities. And I want to acknowledge the ancestors whose names we may never know, the Black midwives whose knowledge traveled across the Atlantic through the Middle Passage, the women who carried African traditions of birth, herbal medicine, and community care into the Americas, and who sustained those traditions through generations despite enslavement, segregation, and systemic attempts to erase their work. Their hands are still with us, their knowledge is still with us, and their legacy lives on in the work we all are doing today. For centuries, Black midwives were the backbone of maternal and infant care across the South. They were often called granny midwives or grand midwives, but that name doesn't fully capture who they were. These women were clinicians, healers, counselors, herbalists, and trusted leaders in their communities. They understood something that modern healthcare system often forgot, that birth is not just a medical event. Birth is social. It is cultural. It is spiritual. It is deeply tied to the health and well-being of families and communities. These midwives were present at the beginning of life for entire generations. They knew the mothers, they knew the grandmothers, they knew the stories of the families they served. But the history of Black midwifery in this country is also a history of erasure. In the early 20th century, as birth moved into the hospitals and medicine professionalized, many Black midwives were pushed out of practice. Regulations were introduced that framed them as unsafe and untrained. And even though they had safely delivered babies for decades, their knowledge, everything that they learned, knowledge rooted in generations of lived experience, was dismissed. And yet, what these oral histories show us is that their wisdom never disappeared. It lived in the stories passed down in families. It lived in communities. And today, we are witnessing a powerful resurgence of Black midwifery. I am a Black midwife. I'm a Black midwife practicing in the South, and every day I feel the presence of these midwives in the work that we do. I serve as the Chief Clinical Officer at Choices Center for Reproductive Health in Memphis, Tennessee, and Carbondale, Illinois. When I first started practicing there, I was the only Black midwife in our community. Today, we have grown into one of the largest Black midwifery practices in the United States. We've created a Black midwifery fellowship program to train and mentor the next generation of midwives. And when I look at the young midwives we are training today, many of whom come from the very communities most impacted by maternal health inequities, I see the continuation of a legacy, continuation of lineage. Because this work has always been about more than birth. It has always been about autonomy. It's always been about dignity, and it's always been about justice. So we know what the Black maternal numbers tell us today in our community.
They're looking for us.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We know what the numbers tell us, that Black women still are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than their white counterpart. And when we talk about this crisis, we have to be honest about its roots. This crisis is not because midwives failed. It is because the system that once supported community birth was dismantled. Midwives were never the problem. In many ways, midwives have always been part of the solution. Across the country, we are now seeing a movement to restore midwifery as a central part of maternal health care. We are building birth centers, training new midwives, reviving community-based models of care, reconnecting birth to the values of respect, cultural humility, and relationship-based care. And in many ways, this work is not new work. It's a continuation. It is a continuation of the work of the midwives whose voices are preserved in this collection, the women who showed up for their communities with courage, skill, and deep love. These oral histories remind us that Black midwifery was never just about delivering babies. It was about protecting life. It was about protecting families. It was about protecting the future of our communities. And so tonight, as we celebrate these stories, we are not just honoring the past, we are also reclaiming a future where the knowledge of Black midwives is valued, a future where communities have access to culturally rooted care, and a future where birth once again becomes a place of dignity, safety, and joy for everyone. Because the truth is, Black midwives have always been a part of the foundation of maternal health in this country. And the future of birth justice will be shaped in part by that return. So thank you, Linda. Thank you for preserving these stories. Thank you for the gift that you're giving us, the gift where we are able to look back and glean from these amazing women. And this is because of you that we're able to have this today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, thank you all. This is off to a great start. And it leads, Nikia, your statement leads beautifully into my first question to kick us off here. I want to start by connecting these historical records, these interviews that have been recorded with the work that's going on today. It's the commitment I feel as a historian and archivist, and I know all of my coworkers here do too. So I'm curious for your thoughts on what lessons from traditional Black midwifery practices do you think are important today and for the future of birthing justice and reproductive justice? Just, I think there's a lot of places you can go with this.
I think
Oh, here.
that my thoughts are that the traditions that I learned about from the midwives that I interviewed, first of all, reflected, I would say, thousands or thousands and thousands of years from the beginning of time, practices that have been sustained. You know, Africa is the beginning, right? So midwives in Africa, those traditions were actually, many of them were continued by Black midwives in the United States in spite of enslavement, right? But many of the things that are at the core of midwifery practices, all right, are about recognizing the woman as being the center of the birthing experience. And that unlike the medical model, where the woman is isolated, separated from family, separated from community, the Black midwives in Alabama were continuing an incredible, timeless tradition of, in Ghana, it was keep, the women in the hut in the village. In Alabama, making certain that the women primarily, who were their neighbors, who they went to church with, were the ones that were in the birthing space with them. So that's one of the things that I think connects midwifery practices and makes them timeless. Tell me again your question.
What lessons from these practices can be important today?
Okay, so I think one is recognizing the woman as the center of the birthing experience. The second thing is recognizing that many of the things that I talk about in my book, in terms of the use of herbs, in terms of the use of natural medicines. Margaret Charles Smith talked about her great-grandmother who was enslaved and was born in Africa, and that she learned how to go out into the woods and collect the particular plants and herbs that would be helpful in terms of the care that she received. So one of the things that I think is key is memory of the use of natural medicines or herbal medicines that come out of the stories that I collected from the midwives. And the third thing I think is the spiritual component, that birth was very much surrounded by singing, referring to biblical psalms. It was the midwives themselves, it was mentioned the calling, that it wasn't seen as a business or as a profession, and certainly not as a way to make money. Alice Walker talks about paying the midwife with the chicken, right? And that their work, and I'll close with this, that their work was not just in the birthing space, right? That they were viewed in the community as the wisdom keepers. They were recognized in their churches. Someone told me that every time a particular midwife walked into the sanctuary on Sunday morning, the entire church stood up, right? Because of honoring her not just as a quote birth attendant, or not simply as, not, I don't want to say simply, but not only because of the skills and the care that she brought to the birthing experience, but the woman herself was a model of spirituality, of caring, as well as a keeper of skill.
Such a good point. Good point. That was wonderful.
Others? Yeah, I was struck by that in listening to some of the interviews, their faith too. And I was struck by the confidence that these women had and how empowered they felt. And I could see that how they also drew on their faith in God to have that. There was their skill, and then there was the trust they placed in the Lord, and how those worked together to accomplish their work. It was amazing. Nikia, did you have a add on there?
I was just thinking about, when we talk about midwifery then and now, one of the things that is so important is also recognizing, that birth is communal, right? And so that we need each other. We need, we care for each other in very different ways, right? And with the medicalization of birth, it just became very sterile and stripped away those, the humanistic part of it. And so I think that that's one of the things that, for me, as a midwife, has been really important. Honoring people's humanity and their dignity, and seeing them in those moments, but being with them, like I said, in their most vulnerable moments, but also their most joyous moments at the same time. So, yeah, it's been amazing.
I think that, I agree with everything that's been said. It's just so wonderful hearing you all talking. It's just great. I want to bring up the fact that the midwives lived in these communities. They were a part of the community. And so it wasn't like there was a shortage and somebody had to move in and they didn't want to live in these rural areas. People lived there. They took care of them. Most of them had to live with the mothers. They were of the children. So I think that that's one thing. Black women didn't have to worry about anybody believing that they were in pain, because the midwives know it hurts. It hurts, and don't tell me to shut up, because it hurts. And people are honored for that. The other thing that working at birthplace, I found there was so much intuition, the intuitive, that goes on. And I wonder what happens to that in a hospital. I can remember the first time we had a baby that the cord was wrapped around the neck, that the midwife, she was taking a little nap and she woke up. The woman was in labor. She left me with, she's in early stages, very early stages. And she got up and she came and she said, "Oh, I dreamed we had a baby that didn't have a neck." Well, I started going crazy. She said, "No, nothing's happening. We got to watch out for the cord." And sure enough, that baby was born and the cord was around the neck, and she reached and pulled the cord off. She used to tell me that she would watch my actions. I would be downstairs working, and all of a sudden, I would just get this idea to go up and check the birthing rooms to make sure everything was right and everything. And she said, "Oh my God, we're going to have a baby." I said, "How do you know?" She said, "You're nesting." Sure enough, a woman would come in later in labor. And then the last story I want to tell about the intuition is that once we were having a birth, and I didn't know what was going on because I've only just been a part of normal births, one baby head first. But I ended up going in the closet and bringing this thing called a Gelpy retractor and handing it to Nancy. Now, do I know what to this day, somebody has told me, but I don't even want to remember what it means. And she said to me, "That's exactly what I need." That all came from stuff up here, And what happens to that when you're in in a hospital room? And you know what I mean? So midwives had this particular calling, but they also had this extra gift. This is what I'm trying to say, of knowing intuitively what to do, how to do it. It's a real gift, and I'm glad that I'm seeing it come back because it can save lives. It can save lives.
Well, that makes me think, Linda, you described this work as a calling for you. And I'm interested in how you came into it in the first place, but really what motivated you to record these stories and save them for posterity, make sure they were, available for others?
So my birthing experience, my disastrous birthing experience.
We all have, right.
At St. Joseph's Hospital, where I had taken these classes with Elizabeth Bing. I had been reading Our Bodies Ourselves.
Yeah.
I was really determined to be a powerful Black woman in the birthing space with my list of birthing demands. And then when I arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital, Elizabeth Bing had said, the last thing you want them to do is to say, we're going to put you in the labor room and we're going to connect one of those, things that make the pit, right? The pit thing to make the labor pains come faster. And I rebelled. I said, no, I'm not. But this went on. And then finally, what I finally gave up was because they kept bringing nuns into the labor room because they couldn't believe that somebody wasn't taking the pit for the labor. And they would keep saying to me, but honey, you don't have to have labor pain because we're going to give you pit and then you won't have the labor pain, right? And so eventually I gave in. But the other thing that happened was that I was determined to have Welton, Ghana's dad, in the birthing room, in the delivering room at the time of birth. And Elizabeth Bing had warned us when we were taking her classes that the most frequent time for babies to be delivered is something like 3:30 in the afternoon, which is when the doctors like to leave to go play golf. And sure enough, it was 3:30. Ghana was born at 3:40, but she was still, came into the world around 3:45. And that's when they started really escalating. We're gonna, give you the episiotomy. We're gonna do all this to get this baby out. And I'm thinking, so you can go play golf. So that experience led to my having the calling and getting involved with Our Bodies Ourselves, the movement that was going on. But that movement had not really captured at that time the attention of the Black community.
No.
Because in thinking about this, at that point, I think because of the civil rights movement that was going on, that there was this idea that equality meant going to the hospital, having a white doctor who had gone to a medical school somewhere. And in fact, what happened after the civil rights laws were passed, the women found out that when they went to the hospital, they were frequently in the basement where the water was dripping on them, right? And they frequently, a couple of midwives told me the story of they went with the mother who had had other babies with the midwife, who became their doula, their champion, their whatever, because they realized that what they thought of as the oasis of the civil rights movement and having equal access to hospital care was meaning the dripping water, the no heat in the basement. That was frequently where Black women delivered. But that was that gap of understanding, right? That the modern way, the white doctor way was the way of creating equity. But once again, when I give these responses, I forget what the question was.
You're doing okay.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. We want to know how you came to this.
Oh, okay. It was that. And then I began work with the nurse midwife program at UMDNJ. And I had an opportunity to observe nurse midwifery practices, but I also knew that the chairperson of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology there he was adamant about low-income women, uninsured women, women would not be interested in midwifery care. They would not be interested in breastfeeding. They would not, because as he said, most of them are on drugs. This is a literal quote. they're not married. So why would we want to even introduce this idea? So, but we're working with the Muslim women and having this community-based initiative where they actually set in on some of the grand rounds of the doctors. And we had like Stevie Wonder, There's a Ribbon in the Sky for My Love, became the theme song for the birth room, that it did begin to open the door for other women who had been previously thinking that the white doctor, white hospital way was the way to have a positive birthing outcome.
Yeah. This great. This makes me think we're talking about, okay, what did the environment in the hospital look like? How was it not what it was cracked up to be? So looking now at midwifery today, it makes me want to ask Nikia, thinking about these interviews, if you could talk to an ancestral midwife today, what would you ask?
I guess, we're in a very interesting time right now where our reproductive freedoms are being dialed back. I guess, I would ask them about how they continue to, practice and deliver freedom in a time where their own lives and the lives of the people that they were caring for were not completely honored. And how do we continue to do that? How are we to continue during these times, right? They lived through it and were able to provide care for their communities. And I guess I would ask them their wisdom on how do we continue to do that in these oppressive times that we are experiencing now. Maybe I would ask them, are they proud of us? Are they proud of the work that we're doing? For me, midwifery is not just about catching babies. Midwives are primary care providers. We don't just care for pregnant people, we care for communities. Many of the people I see and care for are actually not even pregnant, right? And so, I would ask their advice and their wisdom on how do we continue in the face of all the things that we're facing right now, because it is very daunting to be in the South and to be practicing as a midwife. The stories that Linda collected are from Alabama, but they are the same things that happened in Tennessee and Mississippi and Georgia. And the thing is that, while midwifery in our country is definitely seeing a resurgence, and we're seeing more Black midwives. I mean, when I decided to become a midwife and started as a midwife, it was only about 900 that identified as Black that were nurse midwives or certified midwives. And now it's around 1,100. But at one time, there were 5,000 in Georgia alone, right? When I looked at the census in Tennessee, there were 3,500, and so for us to see so few numbers, I would ask them, how do we continue in this? And I think that they would have some ancestral wisdom to help us to hold on.
Thank you. I think this is a good time to listen to a voice of one of them. So if you'll just bear with me for a moment, we're going to play an audio clip from one of the interviews with Margaret Charles Smith that Linda conducted.
How would you cut it? If they noticed you was on the label, they would, scrape, cut it down. all the way around like that. And make a tea. But if it wasn't your time, just like you say you was 7 or 4.5 months or something like that, it would cut them pains off. If you have, some people have pains. Right. Especially been a mother a long time. They have a good many pains before the time for birth. So she would give you that tea and it would cut it off.
Would you just put it in a cup
and pour that boiling water and let it steep?
Would she put anything in it? We had to drink it straight.
Just drink it like it is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people use pepper teas and things like that, but they cut all that out.
Yeah. Did the doctors use pepper tea? Not pepper tea? Just midwives.
Just midwives. As far as I know, I don't know what they did, back from my time back down. About like, I ain't never seen them give nothing but shots.
I don't know if everyone got the last line. I never saw him give anything but shots. Out there. So yeah, I love that selection. The two things that stand out to me from that are her treatment of pregnant women long before full term. We're not just talking about at the moment of a full-term childbirth here. It's more comprehensive care than that. And obviously that take on doctors never giving teas, just shots. And so I'm just curious about your reactions to it. I know in listening to the other interviews, I was really struck by the positive working relationships that the midwives described having with the doctors, who they only called when necessary. But yeah, I'm curious, Linda, how you came to understand that relationship.
Well, it varied a lot depending. It varied a lot depending on the midwife and the accessibility. Margaret Charles Smith, however, did have exceptional relationships. I don't think that her relationships were common, but she had relationships with the health department. She actually, in the 1940s, I think she was actually, this was something that did happen often, that the midwife might have kind of like, I would just call it a nursing assistant kind of position in the clinic. But what that did, she became the person who mothers trusted and therefore would access the prenatal care in the clinic because they knew Margaret Charles Smith would be there. But when I was listening to this yesterday, I recalled that I asked her, was there a doctor in town that she might have had to call on at some point? And of course, she made it very clear to me that she very rarely ever had to call on a doctor, right? But one of the doctors that she said that she did have a relationship with and that she wanted me to meet. And so this was in 1981. And so we went to the Dr. Stagger's home and we were ringing we had not knocked on the door or rang the bell. And I said to her, well, is this the house? Ring the bell. And she said, well, I could never, this is 1981, I could never go in the front door.
Right.
And I said, well, what door would you go in? She said, I always went in the back door. And this is 1981, and I grew up in New Jersey. And so I said to her, but I also wanted to respect her, right? So I said to her, well, what do you think about maybe we could go in the side door? So we went in the side door, and I sat down with him, and he was very direct. He said, I hardly ever had to follow up with the care of Margaret Charles Smith. I can remember less than, thousands of babies, maybe 2 or 3 times that I came out to the house. And so in some instances, there were experienced midwives who had those relationships. But there are other midwives who told the stories of, I delivered triplets. I was trying to get the doctor's attention because I felt that they needed to go to the hospital, and the doctor refused to come and to care for them. So I think it really varied a lot, but what I think happened as a result of this is that the midwives themselves became very adept at learning how to manage situations that the current healthcare system would describe as high risk, right? And not appropriate for home birth, not appropriate for birth center birth. But these women managed to effectively provide care in those emergency situations.
I just want to add that there were a lot of white doctors who would not see Black patients under any kind of circumstances. So if you had one that would see Black patients, they were good, you know what I mean, and helpful. Because I've heard stories about ones who show up, and in my own childhood, of seeing a doctor come to take care of my daddy at 2 a.m. in the morning, a white doctor come and take care of him at 2 a.m. in the morning, you know, and he could have easily not done that. And we trusted Dr. Hutchinson. So but that wasn't everybody, you know, but there was some who would, but they would refuse to take care of Black people. And so those were the ones who wouldn't come for the triplets. The other ones seemed to care, or they would thank goodness, because a lot of us survived who needed, you know, that extra care. I just want to add that in organizing the Black Women's Health Project, we use these stories to get Black women to open up and talk about their experience with birth, and to get into the whole Black women's health thing. You got to understand, in 1980, when I'm traveling around in Georgia with a slide projector and all these things, these people didn't know what I was talking about. They had never heard these three words, you know, Black women's health was not a term. And so I would go into these rural areas and I would take the film on my babies and show them that film. Most of them, except for the older women, most of them had never seen a birth. And they were able to see a birth. And then after the film, we could get them to talking. And we used that. We used the stories, do you know, and the midwives. There would sometimes be midwives in the room that I didn't know were midwives, who would then get up and talk. And so I'm just letting you know, it was a process of getting people to understand and unlearn a lot of the bad things. When they saw in all my babies how this midwife took care of everything. She took food. You know, the husband wasn't treating the woman right. She dealt with that. You know, she cleaned the house. She cooked. You know, she did what needed to be done. And that's what midwives do. They take care of the whole woman and they do what needs to be done and to get the job done. And so I think that was such a good point. And I still think that's one of the great teaching films for midwifery. It was done in the 1940s, but the principles are all still there long before we knew about the social determinants of health and all these things. They were doing all of that. They were doing all of that.
I don't cook, Byllye.
Huh?
I
You
don't
don't cook.
I don't
You do DoorDash.
I do DoorDash and something, but I don't cook.
Back then, you had to cook.
Right.
I just want to say something because you mentioned All My Babies and the Black Women's Health Project. The Black Women's Health Project was critical. Your conference at Spelman College really was an awakening for the Black community. And I saw Dr. Natalia Kanem come in.
You're supposed to be sitting right up here. Yes, she is.
Oh, okay, because the film that we were just talking about, that you were showing clips from, that film was it was a result of knowing Byllye Avery and having those conversations about midwives that led to the Ford Foundation funding a traveling exhibition of midwives. But it was Dr. Natalia Kanem that provided the funding for the Anacostia position, which was the first time really that midwives were honored in a museum. And that exhibition still lives at the African American Smithsonian Museum and actually continues to grow. And so thank you to Dr. Natalia Kanem and thank you to the Black Women's Health.
Okay, as I want to make sure we get to this before we turn to the Q&A. So we're talking about Black midwifery today at a time when Black women face a significantly greater risk of maternal mortality. We've touched on this already. And we're in a country that's already one of just a few where maternal mortality has actually risen since the year 2000, according to the World Health Organization. So yeah, I just want to ask about how can we use this history to tackle the challenges of maternal health today, particularly in light of the hostile climate since the fall of Dobbs?
Yeah, I think this history is actually inspiring us, right? It's inspiring a new group of young Black birth workers who are really taking up the charge and really returning to communal practices. We're seeing now far more, like I said, Black birth workers, whether they're doulas, midwives, even lactation counselors, where we've historically had really poor breastfeeding numbers in our communities. We're seeing a return to those practices as well. But like I said, I think we are craving this information. We are craving this history. We are seeking it out. We want to know what our ancestors did and how we can continue that legacy. So like I said, we're definitely seeing far more young Black women, young Black people, period, that are choosing to become midwives, which is really inspiring, especially because the work is hard, right? The work is very hard. And honestly, some days I don't even know how we're going to continue it. But then we meet these young people who are really inspiring and we want to continue to pour into them and to pour into them for the future, right? So I do believe that this work, these stories, they're being shared. And the fact that we will now have access to them is even more inspiring. We were just in Alabama together last month for the Anarcha Lucy Betsy Conference in Montgomery, Alabama. And Linda was there and all the young people were really inspired by her work. They knew who she was. They knew of her work. And I mean, that's amazing, right? They're seeking out this information. So she was there to pour into that next group of young people. Then we were together actually again 2 weeks ago in Virginia at the National Black Midwives Conference in Hampton, Virginia. And again, Linda won an award there for her work in preserving these stories and really inspiring this next group of midwives, right? So, I read her work when I was in school, and now as a professor, my students read her work and now they'll be able to hear her work as well. So, I mean, that's really amazing.
Great.
Byllye, I'm curious too for your thoughts on this. As somebody you're describing, it's been a process. You've been seeing it for over 40 years now. What's your take on today and where you want to see it go?
I think all of this bad stuff that's happening to us is really pointing to the fact that we need to really draw nigh to each other in our communities and intentionally form communities. Intentionally think about how we can care for each other, intentionally looking at where the gaps are and how we can fill them. And I think you're right when you, I mean, I know you're right when you say it's inspiring, this whole new group of young women. I mean, the fact that BWHI graduated a class of 52 postpartum doulas. And I mean, and doing it on college campuses, which is a good place to do it because these are the women who are going to become mothers, some of them, and the others need to have the information, no matter what. So I think the solution to trying to survive these bad times is to intentionally form communities. And as we said last week, we were whenever we were here the other day for the Reproductive Justice Conference, and we were saying to you young people who have digital communities, keep those, but you need some people communities. The digital thing is fine for telling y'all when to get together, but you need to be able to sit and look somebody eyeball to eyeball, to touch them, to feel them, and things will come out when you're with each other. You know what I'm saying? It kind of feeds, together. But I do think we need to hold on to each other and we need to form intentional communities around wherever.
That program you're talking about, the doula program at Morgan.
Yeah, yeah.
Run by Dr. Kanika Harris.
Yes.
And it was at Morgan State, a historically Black college in Maryland. And it has inspired some other programs, but also there are no midwifery programs right now presently at any of the historically Black colleges or universities. And so to this project that what's it called, Nourish, I believe.
Yeah,
that
called Nourish.
Kanika did.
Kanika did, yeah.
Was really a springboard for Morgan even talking about adding a midwifery program now at their school. So yeah, I mean, so that community is important.
Yeah. And we also picking on Morgan because we had Zanae Epps,
Yes.
who wrote her dissertation on Black women and abortion.
Yes.
And that was the first in the School of Public Health that had ever been written about abortion on the HBCU. So I'm telling you, so we got to work it and at least get these programs in HBCUs,
absolutely,
and make them visible. So thank you for raising that point. I hadn't looked at it that way.
Yes.
What a wonderful thing.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A from the audience, both here in person and on Zoom. So with that, I'm sorry, is there one more?
We wanted Dr. Natalia Kanem to kind of connect her work internationally with what we've been talking about here in the American South.
I think Dr.
Maybe she needs a
Hi,
little
I'm
introduction.
Natalia, and I'm really happy to be here. It's been amazing hearing some of the stories behind the scenes, which I was not aware of. And Linda referenced that it was our honor when I was an official at the Ford Foundation to get her idea of this, I think it was a photo exhibition, and the terminology then was granny midwives. And they were just the most elegant people that you'd ever seen. And then I think you were invited to take that show on the road, if you will. That also sparked some of Linda's thinking about the international connections that quote unquote healers naturally have, midwives naturally have. And so I think in my own international health programming, I did feature midwifery as the type of planning, the type of community connection, but also some of the innovations that midwives bring to the table when the paradigm is supposedly austerity and we can't afford this and we can't afford that. The midwife makes a way out of no way. And with the International Confederation of Midwifery, ICM, which I then reconnected when I was a UN official. I ran UNFPA for 8 years. The issue of who is going to take care of a poor woman in any community.
Right.
The nursing profession and its alliance to organized medicine is as much of a handicap for those of you who are nurses and midwives as it is a strength. So this idea of innovation, of the young midwife understanding, do we want to go to the river and take that bath, or do we want instrumentation and, a C-section or whatever it's going to be? It's a call that somebody has to make. And already, I think the speakers have referenced this factor of trust. If you trust Dr. Hudson, okay, we're going to the hospital. If you do not trust Dr. Hudson, no one's going anywhere. I would like to say that the issues of regulation and over-regulation, to me, I happen to be a pediatrician, a medical doctor, really an epidemiologist myself, but as I see the regulatory challenges to this profession, and on the international level, they're huge. And this label of birth attendant, TBA, whatever, what have you, I mean, highly politically contested. So to a certain extent, I think with all the kind-hearted intentions in the world, midwives have to be a little more political and a little more self-advocating, according to me, than you typically see. And these alliances really do spell the difference between life and death. So Linda, again, hats off to you. Congratulations for persevering. I think the historical method is really important to hear from the midwife directly, her motivation. And it's, I think, a very good harbinger of things to come, that it is that young midwife that's going to defend her democracy. She is the one who is going to fight against homophobia, which is an invention that's now circling the globe. And I sincerely believe that she will also inspire women to have kids. There are a lot of young people who are on the fence right now. And that loving touch and that hand makes a complete difference as to, will you take that giant step forward or not? So thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy that I got to be here. I'd also like to introduce my guests, Dr. Barbara Love and Patricia Loftman, who is a renowned midwife in her own right. Thank you very much.
I just want to briefly say that Natalia Kanem has been more than a funder in my personal life, of the project. She's been a mentor for me. I was pursuing a doctoral degree that I did not complete at Columbia University. And not only did she take care of me and keeping my spirits up and persevering and always giving positive feedback, but I was reminding Ghana, I had to go to some conference or whatever, and it was kind of a midwife thing that you did, right? And I said, well, I can't do it because I don't have a babysitter for my daughter, who was then maybe, I don't know how, elementary school. And Natalia said, don't worry. So then it ended up, she had a chauffeur-driven car to pick to pick Ghana up, right. And then finally, I want to say that I spent almost a month as a white writer in residence at Natalia's home in Popengine, yes, in Popengine, Senegal, working on the biography on Tony K. Bambara. But while there, I had a chance to meet this phenomenal midwife, right? I had a chance to learn about a birth center project. And so to see you, and it's been 2014. This is the first time I'm seeing Natalia since then.
Wow, really?
We have a couple online as well.
I'm going to take some privilege because I'm a reverend. I'm Reverend Dr. Diane Johnson. And I want everybody to take a look around the room and see who's here. Right. And that this is history being made, like the Schomburg turned 100 years, the Schomburg Library in New York City. that is African American collections. And to have Linda's work be part, and for this collection to be established at a legacy institution like Smith is not to be assumed, right? It is profoundly historic. It is profoundly revolutionary, right? And it's so important to state that BFO, that blinding flash of the obvious, right? Because the creation of the value of the legacy, the value of history, the value of the contributions of Black women is always a revolutionary act, right? And so I think and I'm so deeply humbled to be in the presence of revolutionary women who helped create structures that say that Black women matter. Absolutely. That and that we are the foundations, right, of love, of community, of justice, of spirit. And so it's really like there are, I don't know, like 30 women in this room, but we need to remember this day, this evening, right? And then my question is, for the three of you, what's the one thing that you want us to take with us and do? Because I think that we create the communities that we want through action. Like legacy is not legacy until it's action, right? So that's my question. For the three of you, what's the one thing that you want us to know or understand and do?
It's the one hard question.
The one thing.
Just one?
Just one thing.
I think for me, I want you to tell the story, right? I mean, I think that the oral tradition is such an important part of our history and an important part of midwifery. There are some amazing Black midwives in our community now. Tell their stories, whenever I go to conferences, whatever I present, I bring all of them in the room with me. I tell their stories. I tell, Dr. Ebony Marcel's story and Carrie Stewart's story. Carrie is in Chicago. And I tell Dr. Alexis Moore, who's the vice president of ACNM, I tell her story. I carry all of them with me. And I think that telling those stories is really important. Dr. Lastasia Coleman, who's the new director of midwifery at UCSF, and Asmara Gabre, who is developing abortion training at UCSF, and Dr. Jessica Brumley, who is outgoing president of American College of Nurse Midwives, telling those stories, telling their stories, telling the work that we are doing in our communities is what you can do to help to amplify midwifery and Black midwifery in our communities. So I think that for me, that's one of the charges for you. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm all about storytelling too, because I think that storytelling is our medicine and that we can heal and we can learn. So talk to women about birth. And if they've had a baby, talk about that. If they haven't had a baby, what did your mother tell you about your birth? What are your feelings and your attitudes about it? And if you don't want to have a baby, why is it? You can do a lot around getting people to open up with things that are similar experiences. What are your fears? What do you want? And everybody's not going to have a baby, and everybody shouldn't have a baby. And I'm glad everybody's not having a baby. Let me just make that real clear. I'm not saying we all should be having them, because a lot of people have had them, they shouldn't have had them in the first place. But to really hone in, because there's a lot of storytelling within those experiences as women. And I found it is a very successful way to get people to open up. And it leads to other discussions. I mean, we're not just about having babies. We have high blood pressure, we have diabetes, we have swollen ankles and bad feet and everything else. But you're not going to get to that. But this is a good starting point. And it's a good point, you know.
Advocate for midwifery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Midwifery is political.
Right, absolutely.
We are in unprecedented times, and the regulations on our ability to practice to our full scope keeps us out of communities. Advocate for midwifery. Yeah.
Because they don't care about whether our babies live or die.
They don't
us
care.
either.
No,
You know,
they don't.
So stop
No.
thinking that somebody cares about you, because they don't.
Absolutely.
We have to care about ourselves.
I would just add to that something that Tony K. Bombara often said, and that is organize wherever you are, right? So not look for an organization to join or,
Right.
but, you know, if it's at your church, whether it's talking to your neighbor when you go out on a walk, right? Whether you're in the healthcare system and you're at these meetings with doctors, or you do a lot of work reviewing outcomes and all of that. So wherever you are, carry the message that we're talking about in this room right now.
Absolutely.
I just want to say we have a very revered, I'd
Yes.
be remiss if we didn't recognize
Yes,
this person sitting right here on the front row.
yes.
Who's a very revered midwife from New York. It came.
So Pat, do you have
Yeah.
any suggestions in response to that question that was just raised?
The most important thing is developing a relationship with a woman. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how many degrees you have behind your name. What's important is that there is a connection that is made. When I used to precept students, I tell a story all the time. I had a brand new midwife. I was a service director, midwifery service director. And I always used to say, I would use her charts as a teaching example to other people on how to document. But you know what? Patients never wanted to see her. She was the smartest midwife in the room, but she couldn't connect with the women. And so I used to say, what's the point of you having all of this knowledge if you can't translate it and put your hand on a woman and she feels that therapeutic touch? So it's really important that the midwives that we develop today, the focus should be not only on internalizing the information that she needs to be able to care for a woman, but, you know, possessing the skills that are also necessary to go along with that. But one of the things that was really important to me was touch. Touch is very important. Touch is, what women feel from your hands, it's like grandma's hands. That's what's important. Not the degrees behind your name. That's what's important. And women will find you anywhere. And I used to walk around New York City, Harlem, and what you were talking about, community, the patients would see me on a weekend walk in the streets and they would say, well, what are you doing here? I'm not an interloper. I belong here. And they need to see you as part of the community. And then they trust you, and then they come.
Thank you.
Wisdom right there.
Yeah. Any from our Zoom?
Yes, I want to acknowledge that in addition to the folks here in the room with us, we have had over 100 people join us online, including many midwives who wanted to be acknowledged and recognized here. So one of the questions that's come up frequently in the chat Q&A has to do with courage and how to maintain courage in the face of diminishing human rights. This is a question from April in Atlanta.
One way isn't, oh, you want to take it? She wants to take it.
I always tell midwifery ain't for punks. And that's really the answer. You have to be a warrior because this is a fight. Midwifery is not for punks.
T-shirt.
You have to, yeah.
I would
You have
just
to remember your why.
right. I would
Yeah.
just I would just like to add to that warrior idea is that right now we all have to be warriors
Absolutely.
because of what we're facing in the world, right?
Yeah.
And standing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have to remember your why. You know, you have to remember why you're doing this and why you were called to it. And also find community because the work is extremely hard and it does not get easier. And so I think that remembering your why, holding on to that, remember your calling and finding community is really key. Like I said, I practice in a state that is doing some really horrible things, right? But every day I get up and I'm grateful for this work. I'm grateful for the community I get to continue to serve and the people I get to fight alongside to protect people's reproductive freedoms. So yeah, community is out there for you, April. You just have to find it.
I think we have to all remember that we do have personal power. And we don't need to give up our power to anybody. We need to assert it, but we also need to let other people know that they have power.
Absolutely.
You do not have to take this powerless in a powerless position. Part of the reason why you see changes that we have in healthcare came out of the women's health movement. When the women health movement said, we want these changes put in place. They're our power. Now, everybody now is enjoying them and think they always had them. Well, you didn't. And you got them because a group of crazy women said, we're doing this. We're demanding it. And that's what we have to do. We are not powerless as a group. We have power. Remember that. You know?
And I'm remembering also that when I was actually, I mentioned this at the Black Women's Health Conference, that I was feeling really depressed when I left Alabama in 1981 and actually feeling hopeless and had lost my sense of optimism. But the Black women who had been practicing over the decades and whose mamas had been midwives and whose grandmamas had been midwives just looked at me and said, what are you worried about? There is no way that man is going to do away with midwives.
All
Like, you
right.
know, so having that energy in this moment that we're in right now around midwifery care and around so many other issues, I'm thinking about those midwives who kept the faith and continue to know that at the end of the day, midwives would continue to be alive and well and of service in Black communities.
We have time for one more. Does anyone else want to? Okay. Hi, oh, whoa. Hi, I just wanted to thank you all so much for your wisdom and your sharing. And as a senior and someone who's interested in midwifery, I was hoping that you could share a piece of advice for getting started in the work, especially in the current landscape that we're facing right now. And I know you guys have talked a lot about that. It's been really inspiring. Yeah, just like a nugget of wisdom for getting started and what you wish you had heard as you were thinking about this work. Yeah.
That's a good question. First, are you going to be here in this state, Massachusetts?
I'm not sure yet. I'm looking. I'm looking at a lot of different places, potentially looking at the West Coast.
Okay. I think that, here is very favorable, even if you're talking about being on the West Coast, there is a lot of opportunity to jump in and definitely do midwifery. I think you have to choose what type of midwife you want to be and what path you want to be in and seek out that community. I, of course, do community birth. I'm a nurse midwife. So I went to nursing school and then decided to, well, actually, I only went to nursing school to become a midwife. And that's the story of many, actually, nurse midwives going to nursing school to become a midwife. The good thing about being a nurse midwife is we're able to practice in all 50 states. We can practice in all settings. So I do community birth. I've done home birth. I've done birth center birth and been in the hospital as well. And so I like that versatility. I like being able to meet people where they are. Not everyone can have an out of hospital birth. Some people need, the hospital and those interventions that they have there. And being a nurse midwife have afforded me the opportunity to be in all of those spaces. So I appreciate that. But I think you have to find your community and also decide how you want to practice, right? I think for me, it was, when I first started as a nurse, I worked nights in the hospital so that I could see what I didn't want to do. I mean, I knew it helped me to understand how I did not want to practice. And so I think that understanding that and just finding the community for you is, it's going to be really important. You can come to the South. We have a great need there. It's a little harder, but there's a great need. Like I said, I do teach at University of California, San Francisco, which I absolutely love. It's an amazing program, amazing school. But here in Massachusetts, they have some pretty amazing midwives also.
It's a good state.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Very
Yeah,
good.
it's a very good state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for
You're
sharing that.
welcome.
Well, with that, we are just about at time.
Okay.
And so we wanted to close with some final remarks from the panelists. Just your takeaway.
She wants some fun.
She wants some final remarks. Okay.
Linda, this was your idea.
My feeling, I just want to say thank you to everyone that has gathered here because I feel a sense of new energy, new determination, new energy, new determination not to be defeated by the insanity that's going on right now, that we are going to be stronger than we have ever been in the battles that we are facing.
You want to say anything, Byllye?
I don't know.
I want to say thank you for having us. But thank you, Linda. Thank you for this work. Thank you for this gift that will continue to be a gift to us for years and years and years and years and years to come. And I know I speak for all the midwives, and our deep love and appreciation to you for just collecting these stories and preserving them. So, yeah, thank you.
And I got something to say. So I have to say something. I just want to also, once again, thank Smith for collecting and holding these near and dear for us. And thank you for all of the courage of doing it when it wasn't so popular, when it was hard to do, when people weren't believing. Thank you for keeping your eye on the prize and doing it. And I want to thank you because you're training the next generation to come. And you're carrying the legacy and you're carrying it with a sense of pride and a sense of duty. And that's what we need to see, because as some of us get older, we need to know that we're passing a torch. And I feel like you have the torch in your hand and you can do the work. And it's just so wonderful to bridge the gap between these two. It's just incredible. Incredible. Thank you. Thank you.
With that, I'm just going to say one more thank you on behalf of Smith College. It's a privilege to steward these materials. Truly, thank you. And thank you all for being here.
Mariana has been fantastic working with us. She's been really.